Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Mesons Botcast. My name is Remington.
And I'm Elora.
And today is our second episode, and it's going to feature a very special guest, Matt Lozano, the main captain of the Bosons, who are going to Worlds in just a few days. They'll be going next week, and it's going to be a big event for them. They are number 8 currently in the world. Amazing feat of robotics that they've been putting up. And without further ado, here is Matt.
Hello, it's great to be here.
I'm glad you are so enthused to be here. How do you feel, first off, I have to ask, because I didn't realize the competition was next week. How do you feel about that?
Pretty excited. I'd say a little nervous, obviously, because, it's the World Championship. Building up to such a big event, kind of the biggest event you could possibly build up to. But mostly excitement because obviously it's going to be a pretty crazy experience, unlike any other I've had as far as robotics or engineering goes. And I'm just looking forward to meeting a lot of other people and a lot of different teams.
From around the United States and Mexico, right?
The whole world, actually.
Whole world.
So, yeah, a lot of countries are sending people there.
That's cool.
So.
It's pretty cool. So I would like to start by asking how you think this season, you're making it to Worlds, so clearly it's going pretty well, but how just your robotics journey in general has gone?
Well, this season in particular has obviously been it's gone really well. A lot better than last season, because last season we went through 3 different robot designs, none of which worked very well.
Uh-oh.
So this season we made sure to spend some extra time planning out our robot. And then, of course, it's been pretty smooth throughout most of the season.
All right. So I have a question here, and I want to know, what is your biggest thing that you'd say people in First Tech Challenge should focus on? Like, what is your most important thing? Is it design, programming, outreach, any of that?
Ooh, you see, yeah, that's really hard to pinpoint the biggest thing to focus on. It depends, as far as whether it's the most important for success or the most important for, because everybody's going to have a different favorite thing they want to focus on.
Engineering-wise, how about that?
Engineering-wise, I'd say probably just spend a little extra time working on planning out the robot, the actual design itself, because if you start out with a bad robot and a bad design, then the whole season is just going to follow that way. It's going to make the programming hard. It's going to make solving any mechanical issues you have hard. So just making sure you have a really solid basic design for what mechanisms you're throwing on the robot, making sure that's going to work well together before you start the season. That's really going to help everything else out.
All right. Everyone take notes. Wise wisdom from Matt. You should definitely follow that, because this year you do not want to see the CAD file that we used for our robot design. It was horrible. It was just the H channel, right? That I don't know. And then it was just a couple cross bars for a makeshift scissor lift, and that was our entire plan. And then we built our robot around that.
I don't think it looked too bad.
It didn't. It was a little clunker, but it worked. It worked well.
Yeah.
For what it could
matters.
do. So, what does your robot do exactly?
Yeah, well, obviously this year's game challenge is to get cones up onto poles. So our robot specifically basically is a lot of teams you will maybe use a big set of linear slides with string to get the cone going straight up to those poles. Our robot instead uses a big arm. So basically the cone, we grab the cone with a claw on one side of the robot, and then it swings it over to the other side of the robot to drop it. And kind of the reason we did that is just because not only is it faster with us not having to turn around, but also something like an arm is going to be a lot sturdier and more reliable than maybe, say, linear slides or even a scissor lift. Not to diss your robot at all.
Oh, no, ours didn't work at all. So
yeah, well.
We were a push bot.
Still, it gets more points than a lot of other robots. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely think your design is really cool, one of the coolest.
Thank
so
you.
We should probably put a picture of that somewhere. I don't know. We've got to show it off to everyone, because it was very unique, and you're right, a lot of people did do linear slides, and that was, I think, one of the reasons a lot of teams kind of failed was because they would have things snap or just they're not super sturdy, so they'd just wiggle around a lot. But yours was very stable and could just kind of keep going. So
Yeah, you want to make sure you don't focus. I feel like some people focus too much on what can I do to make the physically fastest robot, and then they start to lose sight of, well, what robot's going to work consistently and is not going to need much maintenance.
Okay, so what has been your biggest challenge with this season so far?
This season, our biggest challenge has probably been our autonomous, because there's just a lot of inconsistency already built into the game, like the poles. It says specifically in the game manual that the poles don't need to be perfectly
Completely
vertical.
yeah.
Right, yeah, before the match starts. So obviously that makes it really hard. Well, I can't just, if I tell it to drop the cone in the same spot every time, well, it might miss sometimes.
Yeah.
So we have been able to combat that with things like odometry to have really accurate driving with the robot, and also our little aligner mechanism, so it'll always push the pole underneath the cone.
I would also like to know, because you used a big fancy word, I'm going to try and say this right. What is odometry?
Yes, odometry. So odometry is a way to track the robot's position in autonomous. So if you do something like, you can use an encoder on your motor to track the rotations, and then you can just say, okay, well, I'll track how many times my wheels on the robot spin, and that'll tell me where I am. But the issue is there's always drift, pretty much, which means that if your robot gets, say, pushed by another robot or runs into a pole or something, then that wheel's going to keep spinning, and the programming is going to think the robot's still driving around, and when in reality it's not. So odometry is basically a separate set of wheels that are spring-loaded to the ground, so they always have a very firm contact with the floor, and those separately track where the robot is. So even if the wheels of the robot itself are still spinning, those tracking wheels are going to stop spinning, and then the program is going to know, oh, I'm not moving anymore, I need to do something to fix this.
Okay, wow. Thank you for explaining that, because when you said that, I got a little bit nervous. I don't know what he's talking about, big fancy word. But my next question for you would be, what is it like leading an entire team? Because I will be a co-captain next year, so that's nerve-wracking.
Honestly, less work than I thought. Going into it, I was feeling pretty nervous. I was thinking I gotta know all these different things about how do I organize, get into the competitions, and all of this stuff. But you'd be surprised by how much all the individual members already kind of know how to do things and run the team themselves. So it's more like being the captain. You work a bit more on organizing, specifically when meetings happen maybe, or if you know somebody needs to work on something, you got to go tell them to work on that thing. But that's kind of the biggest role, I think. The biggest thing that changed between me not being the captain, just being a member, and then me being the captain, was really just a bit more of organizing what other people are working on.
Okay. And answering emails, I know that.
Oh yes, lots of emails that are only to the captains, which is always fun
wonderful.
To get flooded with
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Okay, so when did you start first?
So I started doing first my freshman year of high school. So I began in the first Tech Challenge. I never got to do any of the first LEGO League stuff. So I joined the Bosons 3 years ago, my freshman year, and I've been doing it since then.
Nice. I'm not gonna lie, you didn't miss out on too much with first LEGO League. I feel like the gap between first LEGO League and first Tech Challenge is a little daunting.
Yeah.
Because it goes from this tiny table with a little robot that just runs autonomous code to a big robot where you have to program driving and actually it's giant,
Yeah, going to outreach events, I see the first LEGO League table set up and then have our robot next to it, and I'm sure for maybe some people in first LEGO League that can almost look a little scary, jumping into such a bigger scale with completely different set of components and programming and driver control. But it's really not too bad, because you can almost argue it's even a bigger jump to go from having zero robot experience going into first Tech Challenge. But it wasn't too bad.
I know it was a little daunting, because I would see the Bosons and other teams driving around, because I was in first LEGO League for 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. So I was just oh gosh, that's gonna be me. Oh no.
It can definitely be a little nerve-wracking going into it.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for beginners in engineering or first or?
I would just say, just don't never be intimidated by the fact that you don't have any experience going into it. Like, it can seem like, oh, I need to know how to program or design things or something if I want to join robotics, but most robotics and just engineering competitions and groups in general don't expect you to have much, if any, experience going into it. It's just have a willingness to learn how to do those different things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, back to the game. What is your game plan for, or what has been your game plan, I guess, for this season and for Worlds?
Yeah, well, so up until this point, our game plan has usually been not the sturdiest. It's mostly been kind of improvised during the match. How can we get the most points? How can we get the most cones on poles? But the further into the season we're realizing, well, we only have so many cones to use, and most robots can easily score all the cones by themselves, and maybe half of the time they're given. Mm-hmm. So it's switching a lot more to strategy now. Mm-hmm. So going into Worlds, I don't want to give obviously too much of our strategy away or anything, but really just a lot of focusing on getting ownership as opposed to just, oh, let's get as many cones as quickly as we can on a high pole. Mm-hmm. It's more of how many of the different poles can we have ownership of.
Okay, all right. How much time do we have? We got like 5 minutes left, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck at Worlds.
Thank you.
You guys will do great, I'm sure.
Hope so.
All right, goodbye, everyone.